So, what you understand by the term called resource? If I ask you what is resource, how will you explain resource?
Sir, maybe raw materials.
Yeah, in the context of this subject, resource would be the raw material on which we are working to create some defined product or service which we can sell in the market. That is what is our resource. And I believe you would have understood from the beginning, like what we are studying and all. It's we are studying the process of conversion of raw material into finished good, and in that process of conversion of raw material to finished good, we have understood what is product, what is service, how the process to be done, what should be the quality of the raw material. Okay, we have understood the facility layouts and all, last class and all. We discussed different kinds of layout: your process layout, product layout, cellular layout, fixed position layout. Now we are talking about, in this chapter talk about, we'll focus more about raw material. Last chapter we focused about the layout, planning and all. This chapter will focus on the resource, the raw material. So we'll talk about the feature of that resource and all. So before that, let's talk about a term called aggregate planning. So planning can be short-term planning, which you deal with day-to-day work, scheduling, and sometime inventory problem. Planning can be your intermediate planning, which is between long run and short term, and which is concerned with how will you work on your raw material and facility management. Planning can be long term, which normally what you say decision makers do for the long term perspective, maybe beyond the year. So we when we talk about planning can be defined in different ways and all. So when this word, the word what you're gonna study in this chapter is called resource aggregate planning. And here the word aggregate planning is a medium term production plan, which is usually for 3 months to 1 year. Okay, so planning can be short term planning, planning can be aggregate or medium term planning, planning can be long term planning. When we talk about aggregate planning, it is somewhat, you can say it is a medium term production plan, which is usually for 3 months to 1 year, and it focuses on deciding how much to produce and when during that period. So here, basically, when we talk about aggregate planning, it is a planning for 3 months to 1 year. And here, what is the objective of doing this aggregate planning? The objective of doing this aggregate planning is to discuss how much we can produce and when that production can happen. So first is the quantity, and next is the time period. Planning for the in order to work on the raw material, and when we are working on the raw material, we are trying to understand our production plan, and that production plan would be between 3 months to 1 year, where we are planning in the sense that how much means q n, and then and for what duration we are going to do that. That is what we are going to discuss here. Because one thing we know that the machines, building, equipment, whatever we are going to use, those are our fixed assets. And whenever there's a change in demand, that change in demand has to be managed by adjusting the number of workers or inventory level. So the main aim here is to meet the demand at the lowest possible cost. Next chapter will talk about costing, about the raw material. Here in this class we are talking about the planning of the raw material on all. We are talking about how much we can produce and when we can produce. And next class we'll talk about the costing of the raw material, where economic order quantities, those kind of terms, if you remember or if you studied, we'll talk about those kinds of terms, where we'll do all calculation of inventory, carrying cost, ordering cost, annual demand. There's a one mathematical formula is also there. We'll use that formula to decide that fact. Okay, so the question is that why we call this as aggregate planning, why we are supposed to be know about this term called aggregate planning. It is called aggregate because it deals with overall quantities, not the individual product. That's why we calling it as the aggregate product. For example, like instead of planning to make five types of cars separately, a company can plan for the total number of cars to be produced, where the total demand is estimated without focusing on the specific product details. Because maybe if you are dealing with a small and medium enterprise productions and all, that time you can focus on very small batches, you can focus on their qualities and all. But when we are talking about some kind of mass production and all, you cannot focus on individual quantities and the qualities and all. You have different department of quality control which focuses on Six Sigma and all. They might be worried about those things, but here when we are talking about aggregate planning and all, we are more focused on the total productions. That total production, when we are looking into that, what matters while looking into the total production is that how we can manage our cost, how we make sure that we can have maximum production with the minimum possible cost. That is something would be the perspective of this form of discussion. So planning, when we talk about planning, planning can be long term, which focuses on big and long term decisions. Example like buying new machine, launching new product, or changing the production method. Short term planning involve day to day work like scheduling and managing inventory, while intermediate or aggregate planning, it is fall between your long and short term planning, and it balances available resources. What all available resources you have? You have workers, you have machines. So it basically, aggregate planning is basically more concerned or more focused, where you are trying to balance your available resources like your workers and machines with the demand, and thereby it ensures that the company can meet the demand in an economical way for about 1 year. So that is what the perspective of this form of discussion, because we are more concerned with the working capital management. And when we are more focused on the working capital management, the companies normally, instead of focusing on short term or long term planning, they focuses more on aggregate planning, where for the aggregate planning, the objective of the company is to balance the available resources, their workers, machines with the demand in such a way, so that they can create some kind of master schedule which lists down what product will be made and when, and then day to day schedules are created from that master schedule, and then it is closely observed, and it can be closely linked with the facility planning and scheduling. So that is the objective of this working called aggregate planning, where a company is more focused on creating whatever the available resources they have, available resources in the term of machines, in the terms of worker, and how they can use that available resource to plan for the production for within an year, where for the year they can plan something called master schedule, and while focusing on master schedule and then create day to day schedule, so that they can have an overall idea about the production, what is happening with the planning, what they made with the production. I hope that part is clear with you.
Yes, sir.
Then, when we talk about aggregate planning strategies, so the main input in production are basically what are your main input of production. Your main input in production are basically your labor, your material, your capital. Okay, and when we know that your demand is increasing, the company can use more labor or more worker, or they can make them to work overtime to produce more. So they can use material, they can use inventory, they can work on inventories back order, or they can make sure that whatever they have the resources. Sometime if you don't have resources, you can bring resources on outsourcing basis also, so that your resources can be handled to handle the change in demand. Because it's not like any company definitely don't want to have too much fixed cost. Although we every companies have available resources in the form of labor, in the form of material, in the form of capital. But any company don't plan for long term beyond an year in that perspective. They focuses more on short term, not short term, better word would be aggregate, for maybe 3 months to 1 year. And they try to make sure that their available resources should be employed for during that time period. But if sometime if overproduction requirement comes also, then you have the facility of subcontracting means bringing the labor on contract basis, and then that can be employed to get the required demand. So here, when we are talking about the strategies, the two strategies for the aggregate planning are: first is the change the size of the workforce. The next is basically the changing the working hour. Definitely, if the demand will come more, for example, then more workers can be employed. And imagine if the demand become low, then layoff of the worker would be done. If demand would be more, then automatically overtime would be expected from the employees and all. So that way, or you can bring more employees and all. That way, this objective of aggregate planning could be managed. And sometime if you need that, you need more inventories and all, so that inventory demand fluctuation can be managed. So because as in planning holder, like imagine if I'm the production manager of a company, then it is very difficult to analyze how much inventory would be required, because the demand changes very fluctuating. So if because the demand is changing very much fluctuating and all, then because with the change in demand, how will we make sure that we'll have the appropriate inventory? Because you can bring labor, you can bring machines, you can bring capital, but without inventory you cannot do anything. So so then we need some kind of proper coordination between the production department with the what you say supply chain department, where whenever there's a need of inventory, that need should be managed. So like, because you cannot keep every time extra inventory, certain extra inventory can be kept, but always it's not possible that a company can have always enough inventories, because the demand keep fluctuating. And that's the reason why we studied a very important topic called demand forecasting. So if we have a better method, either we are using quantitative method or either we are using qualitative method. If we have better method of demand forecasting, definitely that issue of managing inventory, I believe, would be much more resolved. I also believe that you will agree with the fact that if we have a proper demand forecasting mechanism, or some form of method if we have, then automatically managing the inventory would not be issue. And if we have enough inventory with the appropriate demand requirement, definitely engaging resources, either your labor or material, will not be a problem. Then subcontracting, already I have mentioned and I have made you to understand the term called subcontracting. So when you bring extra labor from outside, like if your demand rises, okay, and because if your demand rises above your normal level, then the company has to get the help from outside vendors or other firms to produce the additional goods. And this is what we call as subcontracting. It helps to meet the demand without putting too much pressure on the in-house capacity. Okay, so I hope you have understood the term called subcontracting and all. Here, a few guidelines are given about aggregate planning. Okay, few guidelines are given for the aggregate planning. You can read about this guideline. This guideline is about forecasting for the demand. If we have better forecasting method, then planning would be good. Then it's talking about the corporate policy regarding the controllable variables, So certain variables are controllable, certain variables are uncontrollable, which as in production process, you some many parameters you might not account for. Those are uncontrollable variable. Uncontrollable variable we cannot do much, but for controllable variable we can have a policy. Okay, then if we have a better forecasting method, then planning would be good. And if planning would be good, then definitely we can have a like enough inventory with us. With that enough inventory, we can manage a stable workforce. Certain urgency of subcontracting and all would not be much more required, and then that will give a lot of flexibility in the production cycle, without giving too much pressure on overtime and all. And that way we can have production in controllable manner. And then that production what would be doing, that can be cross verified with the master schedule what we have made for the planning of the production. And then that way the demand would be resolved, the requirement of demand would be resolved, and that way the process would be enough for the company. Now talking about the properties of aggregate planning. So what properties aggregate planning should have? Following characteristic to help the production manager. First, they it need to have a logical unit of measurement. So both output and sales should be expressed in simple overall term. For example, a car company might plan for 1,000 car per year without specifying each model. A paint company might plan for 10,000 liter of paint, not each of color separately. So when we are talking about properties of aggregate planning here, more or less, if any organization, any firm which is engaging in the process of production, if they have some kind of figure if they have in their mind, uh, based on the production what they're planning, okay, that figure need to be what you call, it should not be breaked up into uh, many units to quantify the measurement and all. But overall, if they have some kind of figure in their mind, maybe there's automobile company, they're planning that they would produce 1,000 vehicle per year, rough figure. Not with It does not need to have some kind of specification related to what would be the variety of each vehicle and all. And maybe there's a paint company saying that they need to have 10,000 liters of paint, where they did not need to mention the quantities of each variety of color and all. Some kind of, if we have rough estimate in our mind, and if that rough estimate, as in production company, if you have that rough estimate which can be quantifiable in some form of number, then it would make more logical. Then whenever we talk about aggregate planning, we are talking about planning for a certain time period, maybe between 3 months to the 1 year. And for during that time period, there should be a good demand forecast for the planning period. And then if the company can make cost estimation, where they can talk about what would be the cost involved in production, and if they could be aware about the alternatives what all are there to meet their goal, then it would be good decision for the company that they have a model, and that model can be developed to make sure that the best or near best decision for the production plan can be worked upon. Okay, then talking about the facilities, whatever the facilities and any organization which is engaging in production, if they have, okay, those facilities, maybe machines, maybe building, that should be fixed for the planning period, and that should be used effectively for the goal purpose. Otherwise there's no point of having a clarity on the goal what they want to do. So this would be the properties of aggregate planning and all. So Adisha, can you just summarize what all we have discussed with regard to the properties of aggregate planning, or what is aggregate planning is all about?
Okay, sir. So planning actually they can be of two types, long term and short term. This
Long term,
aggregate
no, no.
planning.
It could be long term, short term, or medium term. That medium term is called as aggregate planning. You got it?
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell.
So aggregate planning is stands in between both of them,
Hmm,
ranging from 3 months to 1 year. So they concentrate both on current available facilities and long term, like current means in case of labor and machineries in case of long term.
hmm,
So they see that in how much quantity is to be produced. They're talking about resource now. So resource is nothing but raw materials that we are working on. So
hmm,
they in this we see how much it quantity has to be produced and at what time it has to be produced.
hmm, hmm,
And we saw aggregate planning strategies.
hmm,
In this, there were four. One is change in size of workforce.
hmm,
According to the demand, we have to see if we have to add more laborers or deduct them.
hmm, hmm,
Then changing in working hours. If at all the demand is more, we have to extend the working time and vice versa. And
hmm.
even in changes in inventory levels, because if demand is getting more and more, we have to have more inventories in order to meet those demands. And subcontract, if at all we are not able to you like make in our own house, we'll need to take subcontract without giving any pressure to the inner house.
Correct. Very good. Very good.
And finally we saw properties. Before that we saw few guidelines
Hmm, hmm, hmm,
that has to be followed.
hmm.
uh, After that it nothing, it just roughly it told that how good the forecasting will be, it will be better for us to plan. If at all we have done the forecasting properly and effectively, we will know how much labor to maintain or inventories to maintain. So it will become like a base for next to know what we have to do next. Next, we came through properties of aggregate planning. In this, they tell that we don't focus on one particular unit, we focus on overall thing. Like they took the paint example over here, that they're telling they are producing 10,000 liter of paint. They didn't mention specific color of paint. They just told uh, like overall paint how much they are producing.
Yeah, you don't have to be too much like when you are doing aggregate planning and all, you don't have to be very much specified on each and every detailing and all. If you have some rough estimate in your mind which can be quantifiable, which can be achievable, which would be real, not something superficial, then that would be more than enough, so that you get an idea, you get an idea about okay, fine, how much that need to be done. Then when you do more detailing, when you do more master scheduling, planning and all, then automatically those detailed specification would be done. But initially, if we have, like when you are sitting and thinking about the planning for the next 1 year, then first if we have some kind of goal, vision, mission, that would be good, because that would make sure that our work should be aligned with the our policies and all. Like every company have some policy, like Tatas and all, they believe on more of social giving, okay, society giving. They are not, which is known as a some company which is very aggressive. Okay, very aggressive in the term of layoff and all, very aggressive in the term of environmental damage and all. So every company have some kind of policies, like you are getting me now, some kind of corporate policies. That corporate policies, when you have, then you know that what all parameters, what all variables you have, which are controllable for you. And if you know that which all parameters are controllable for you, if you have those list down para variables and all, then accordingly, then you can know that your guideline, you know that your what you say, restriction, your zone of working. When you know that your zone of working, you can definitely have an idea, you can create an forecasting. That forecasting what you create, based on that you can do planning. And once you do the planning, then you bring your raw material, then you bring your labor, then you bring your machine, and then you start your production. While doing all this and all, you don't need very detailing specification. You just need to create some kind of a roadmap, and you need to define that roadmap in some form of numbers about how much you are actually expecting. I hope you are getting it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And we fix even relevant cost
Huh.
over here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we can fix out the ultimate objective is that you have something in your mind. Whatever you have that in your mind, that should be bring down in the paper. If you can bring down in the paper, then automatically you can do scheduling, you can do master planning, then you can do day to day calculations and all automatically. Then your production will be aligned with your scheduling what you made.
Yes, sir.
है ना? Then what are the properties of aggregate planning? The whatever
So that
told.
only
हाँ,
it should be expressed in
हाँ, हाँ,
one logical unit of measuring.
हाँ.
Like we see overall, not of a particular unit. And
Correct.
then
हाँ.
we also have some we fix some what cost relevant cost associated with the process.
Hmm.
And then the main objective facilities, they are considered to achieve the main objective of the organization.
Correct, correct. So now we'll do one numerical. So this one numerical is given here. Like there's a company called ABC Limited, and they have developed the forecast for the group of items which have this following demand pattern. You can see they have given the data for 8 quarters. 8 quarter means 2 year data is given. 1 year have 4 quarters. So for 8 quarters, the demand is given to you, and next to the demand, there's a data of cumulative demand is given to you. You understand what is cumulative demand? Adisha, what do you mean by
Yes, sir. Yes,
cumulative
yes.
demand? You
Got
understand, na?
it. They've added, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
270 plus 220 and so on.
Yeah, yeah. So that data is given to you, demand and aggregate demand is given to you. Then the firm estimates that it costs 150 rupees per unit to increase the production rate. So if you want to increase the production rate, because that is the reason why you need to have appropriate planning, because in between your production, if you try to increase your production or if you try to decrease the production, you have to pay the additional cost. So that costing is given, that if you try to increase the production, then for every unit you need to pay 150 rupees, and if you try to reduce your production, then also it would cost you. How reducing the production would cost you? Hello. How reducing the production would cost you? Because how the reducing in production will cost you? Because see, imagine you planned for 2000 unit, for example, but only 1000 unit is actually the demand. So what actually happened? You planned for 2000 unit. So for the 2000 unit, you bought that many employees. Are you getting? You had too many machines ready for production of 2000 unit, and you have that many workforce ready for the production of 2000 unit. But in reality, when the production started, you realize that the demand is not that much. Then what will happen? You have to pay your labors. Your machines are ready to be worked on, and if imagine if those machines are of lease or something like that, then you have to pay the cost for the lease. You have to pay the cost of the employees. You have to pay the cost of the material what you bought. That material will get depreciated. So if you reduce the production, then the cost per unit is given as 200 unit. If you are increasing the production, then it would cost 150 unit per 150 rupees per unit. If you are trying to reduce your production, then it would cost you 200 rupees per unit. And then it is given the carrying cost of the inventory is given as 50 rupees per unit. Okay, and 100 rupees per unit if you use subcontracting. And so when you get the numerical and all, these all data you have to write somewhere. Okay, so what all this, so increase in production cost per unit is 150 rupees, decrease in production cost per unit is 200 rupees, then carrying cost of inventory is 50 rupees per unit, and managing the inventory, carrying cost means managing the inventory and all. Then for if you use subcontracting, then you need 100 rupees per unit. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
And let me write it down somewhere. So if you are increasing your production, increase in production, if you are increasing in production, then it is
Sir, that is
costing.
nothing but the economies of scale, na.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
if
yeah.
you produce
Okay.
more and more, the cost will
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
be less.
Okay. If you studied all this thing, then good. If you are trying to decrease your production, then it would cost you 200 rupees per unit. Then it is given as the carrying cost. Carrying cost of production is given as 50 rupees per quarter. Carrying cost is not as per the 50 rupees per unit per quarter, sorry, per unit per quarter. And then you have subcontracting cost, and that is given to you 100 rupees per unit. Okay.
Sir, are you writing it down somewhere?
Yeah, yeah, I'm writing down those things so that while doing the numerical, I can explain you in much more better way. And then the demand is given to us. This demand and cumulative demand is given to us. Then what they're asking us here, they're asking us compare the cost of the pure strategies. I'm writing down in paper because system, if I start writing down, then it would consume more time. So I just wrote down in paper so that while explaining you, I can explain you in better way.
Okay, sir.
है ना? Okay, fine. Then what they're asking us to compare the cost of the pure strategy. So what is pure strategy? First, I have no idea what is pure strategy. So when you do in exam, before that, you need to understand the term called pure strategy. So what is basically the pure strategy? In the pure strategy, the actual demand is met by varying the workforce size. This means that during the period of low demand, the company must fire the worker, and during the period of high demand, the company should hire more worker, what is we called as subcontracting. These two steps involve associated cost. In this strategy, the production unit will be equal to the demand and value in each period. You understood what do you mean by pure strategy?
Yes, sir.
है ना? So pure strategy is actually mean that based upon the demand, you need to do the production. If you have more demand, do more production. If you have less demand, do less production. Fine. So here, this all I have written down these parameters, and I have like what is pure strategy, that also we have discussed. So first, here we need to discuss the cost under these strategies. So when we are doing cost under these strategies, so under the first plan, the company will produce exactly what they are needed. Okay, and but if the production will increase, then the cost what they involve would be 150 rupees per unit. While if the production would decrease, then the cost what would involve would be 200 rupees per unit. And this is the demand what is given for 8 quarter. Correct na?
Yes, sir.
This is the demand what is given to us for the 8 quarter. This demand is given to us. Then in first plan, what we'll do, we'll calculate the increase or decrease in demand. Okay, so from 270, the demand decreased by 220. So here your demand decreased by 50 unit. So if your demand decreased by 50 unit, then your cost of decreasing you have to pay. For cost of decreasing would be 200 rupees per unit. So for 50 unit, that would be 10,000 rupees. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Then from 220 it become 470. So here your demand increased by 250 units. So if it increase, then what is the cost of increasing? Then it would be 250 into 150. That would be 37,500. Like this we'll do for all the 8 quarters. So whenever the from 670 if it become 450, your demand decrease by 220 unit, and per unit of cost of decreasing is 200 rupees. So 200 into 220 it become 44,000. So for each quarter, for increase and decrease of demand is calculated. If it increased, then we have to pay the cost of increasing of demand in the term of monetary term, and if it decrease, then we have to pay the cost per unit in the term of monetary term. And then with that basis we calculated the total cost. We calculated the total cost, and the total cost you can calculate here. This would be your total cost. This way we calculated the total cost. Sorry. We have 36, 38, 33, 34, 34, 36, 37, 38, 39 F. So this is the your total cost. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So this is what is being calculated. Total cost. So same thing is written here. So whenever the demand increase, then your cost of increasing production level you have to pay. Whenever the demand decrease, cost of decreasing production level you have to pay. And then for each change in quarter, we calculated the total cost. Okay. Then there's a method too. There's a plan too. In the plan too, so we need to compare the different plans of pure strategy. So plan one will produce based on the actual demand. In plan 2, the company compute the average demand. Okay, so in plan 2, what is plan 2? In plan 2, the company is like in plan 2 the company is not gonna calculate or not gonna produce what is the demand during that time. Instead of that, in plan 2 the company will compute the average demand. Okay, so average demand means for 8 quarter you have the demand. For 8 quarter you have the demand, right? For 8 quarter you have the demand. So what is the demand for 8 quarter? This is the demand. Then can you find the average? Yes. Divide this by 8. You got the demand. So what is the average demand? The average demand you got is 365. So in plan 2, the company compute the average demand, and they'll set its production capacity to this average demand. And then whatever the average demand they have calculated, for example, here we calculated as 365 unit. That is the average demand. That is the average demand per quarter. So the average demand per quarter, what we have calculated as 365 unit, and then they will set its production capacity to this average demand, and this will result in excess of unit in some period. Because if like because see no here in plan 2 here, like you planned 365 365 unit, but the actual demand is only 270 unit or 220 unit. So when you have calculated the average demand and all, and then that you are comparing with each quarter demand and all, definitely sometime you will have excess in some period, you would have shortage of unit in some other period. This extra unit will be carried as the inventory for the further use, and shortage of unit would be fulfilled by using this future inventory. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
And then the cost of plant 2 is computed in the table below. Okay, so we'll understand the plan 2 method here. So plan 2 method, this is your average demand. This is your average demand 365 unit. Okay, and then you can see for different quarters these are your demand. Then we can we like, how to calculate the cumulative demand from your demand and all. Then what we did, we calculated the cumulative production. Cumulative production, how we calculated? 365 into quarter. So 365 into what is a quarter? This is quarter one. Cumulative. See, your average demand was 365. 365 into the quarter one. This is your cumulative production for the first quarter. For the second quarter, it would be 365 into your 365 into your quarter two. Like this for each quarters and all, we calculated the cumulative production quarter. This is compared with the cumulative demand. Okay, this minus this, 730 minus 490. So if it extra, that is your surplus. है ना? That surplus you will use in the form of, in the time of deficit. So this is 95 is extra. Then here you have 730 minus 490. You got 240 unit extra. Here 1095 minus 960, you get 135 unit extra. But here 1460 minus 1630, here minus 170, like this. For each quarter, you will calculate the change in inventory. The change in inventory would be your cumulative production minus your cumulative demand. So cumulative demand, you understand, it is given already in the problem. Cumulative production, how you got? Cumulative production you got by multiplying 365 with your quarter. Why 365? Because 365 is your average production, average demand. Okay, and then here uh, you can see that whatever is your demand requirement, that got fulfilled. You can see here what is the demand requirement, it got fulfilled here. So in when we see quarter 5 and all, quarter 5 we had the maximum negative inventory, where we had the shortage of 255 units. Okay, now once we have calculated and we realized that in quarter 5 we had, like, out of this increase or decrease in the inventory and all, we calculated the most sensitive unit. The most sensitive unit we got as 255 unit, and that shortage of 255 unit we got in quarter 5. Then what we do, we adjust the inventory to avoid the shortage. To prevent the shortage, the company should start with 255 unit in inventory in the beginning of quarter 1. So in the beginning of quarter 1, your original inventory was 95. Then your this difference, yeah. So in quarter 1, 1 minute, huh? So here, if you see in quarter 1, you had the difference of inventory of 95. Then you have this all data 95, 240, 135, all that. This was the inventory value. How you got the inventory value? With the difference between your 365 into inventory minus your cumulative inventory, you got this. And since you realize that in quarter 5 you got the shortage of 255 unit, so what we did, we added the 255 with the 95, because 255 shortage came, you knew that. So because the 255 shortage came, so what we did, we added in the beginning only. Okay, we added in the beginning only. So when we added in the beginning, then that issue does not resolve. That issue does not persist. Clear? So that in quarter 5, this will become 0. This will become, this will become 0. And minus 170 plus 255. Sorry, minus minus 170 plus 255, then here minus 255 plus 255. So we realize that during the quarter 5 there was a negative inventory of 255 unit, so that is added in the beginning only. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
And then the inventory holding cost is calculated. So each quarter this was your adjusted inventory. So each quarter this is your adjusted inventory. Then that this adjusted inventory is multiplied with the inventory carrying cost. So inventory carrying cost is given in the numerical as 50 rupees per unit per quarter. So this is multiplied with the 50 rupees. Okay. So if you multiply this with the 50 rupees, you got the holding cost. You got the calculation of the holding cost. So this calculation rupee term is not there. You got the calculation of this holding cost. You got the calculation of this holding cost. And then this sum, if you do the sum of this will give you the total cost under the plan 2. So in plan 1 was very simple. Plan 2, what exactly we did? Can you explain me?
Sir, we took the demand forecast and the quarter.
Hmm.
We did cumulative demand,
Hmm.
and then we took the average demand. We added all those and took the average of it. We got
Hmm.
365.
Hmm.
And then we took cumulative product level, nothing but we multiplied average into the quarter.
Hmm.
And then when we subtracted cumulative production from cumulative demand, we
Hmm.
got inventory, that is 95, 240, and all those
The
things.
inventory
And
data we got. Huh.
yeah, we found that the maximum thing was 255 in negative. So
Hmm.
we had to adjust it. For adjusting, we added 255 for all other numbers.
Hmm.
And in the place of 255, we made it zero.
Hmm. Because you
And then,
because you knew that in quarter 5, for example, you will need that time 255 unit, means there's negative of 255 unit. That is the the bottleneck, no, that is the most critical thing that you need to manage. So when you added 255, so that 255 what you are adding and all, that is creating an additional carrying cost. You're getting now, beyond buying inventory and all, you know that in quarter 5, if you go with as per the plan, if you go as per the plan, then in quarter 5, when you reach the quarter 5, you'll need there would be a shortage of 255 unit. So how to make sure that in quarter 5 you'll not have the shortage of 255 unit? For that, from first quarter only, you need to have a surplus of 255 units of inventory, so that when that phase of quarter 5 come, that phase you end up with zero zero costing. You're getting now, in order to make sure that you, what do you say, in order to make sure that you pass that phase, you need to maintain a carrying cost. And for carrying cost per unit per quarter is 50 rupees. So you have to pay that cost. And as per that calculation, when you did, you got the total cost as 96,500. So from the first method, you got the total cost. From the first method, you got the total cost. If plan A, you got the total cost of 1,97,000. With the plan B, you got the total cost of 96,500. So 96,500 is pretty less than the 1,97,000 what you had from the plan A. Clear?
yes, sir.
Then we have this plan 3. Plan 3 is about subcontracting method. Okay. So talking about subcontracting method, So norm here what we did, the company fixes normal capacity 200 unit per quarter, because 200 is the lowest demand among all quarter. So if I see demand from all the quarter, if I see the demand from all the quarter, then the lowest demand from all the quarter is 200 unit. Bottleneck. You remember bottleneck. The lowest demand from each quarter, the minimum, the minimal unit demand. If you see as per the demand, the minimum demand, as if you see for each quarter, all quarter data, the minimum demand has came as 200 unit per quarter. So the company fixed a minimum they have to produce 200 units per quarter. Minimum they need, what, how much inventory minimum they need? 200 unit. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So every quarter in-house production should be minimum of 200 unit. And if the demand become higher than 200 unit, then the extra unit are made by subcontractor. This is subcontracting method. Have you understood this?
Yes, sir.
है ना? So now what is done for each quarter? This is the demand. Okay, in-house production. In-house production means you are understanding, because they knew that minimum they that the bottleneck is 200 unit. So in-house they manufacture only 200 unit. Whatever is the demand beyond 200 unit, that they will outsource. So here we calculated the subcontract units. Clear, na? This all demand minus your in-house production. Now this extra what you calculated, 70, 20, 270, 470, all that, that will multiply with the subcontracting cost. Subcontracting cost is already given as 100 rupees per unit. So we'll multiply with the subcontracting cost, and then what we did, we calculated the total cost. And the total cost under the subcontracting method, we are getting as 1,32,000 rupees. So if you compare all three plan, the best plan what you are getting, which is reducing your cost, the best plan is plan 2. Understood?
Yes, sir.
So
Sir, where
this,
was that 100 given actually?
what, 100?
Subcontracting cost
Huh.
per unit, 100. Where is it given, sir?
Given already in the numerical only. That's why I told you write down this.
Okay, yeah, in the starting it's given. Got it,
Ha
sir.
ha ha. That's why, if that's the reason why I'm, even then I knew, I wrote it down the figure and all, because if you write you'll remember that. Then we just as saw the scenario, and as per our understanding, the best method or the best plan what we can use is the plan B, where the total cost is coming minimal, 96,500.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this much we'll do today. We'll continue then tomorrow. And illustration 15 we'll discuss tomorrow. Fine.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.